Hello, everyone. I am the co-founder of Copperate. Evelyn already mentioned Copperate, and just to briefly introduce, because you might not have known of us or heard of us before, we are a niche consulting firm, for lack of a better word. We're operating from Amsterdam, and we're really working towards implementing the circular economy in practice. So we try not to do too much in terms of research, at least not paid research. We do research, but only the research we find really important. But we're really focused on implementing circular economy in practice. What we also find very important in order to do that is actually to give the right example. So that's why I also say, for lack of a better word, we are a consulting firm, because I think we really need to change the business models of all the firms in the world in order to actually move towards a circular economy. And that is why we also actively rethink our own business model. And I would be actually very happy if in 5 years' time, Copperate would no longer exist, because we would have realized all the impact that we need to realize. And for these efforts, in terms of business model change, we are a B Corp and also a social enterprise. But now moving on to my story. Let me start with a story that starts 11 years ago. 11 years ago, I was involved in a tendering process for a social housing corporation. We were working on the redevelopment of a neighborhood in the west of Amsterdam, and it was known as one of the worst neighborhoods in the entire country because of its bad social cohesion. So a lot of social issues were going on right there. And we then created the ambition that if we were to demolish and rebuild this neighborhood, we would want to do that in a climate neutral way. In 2008, of course, climate neutral was very much focused on the energy side of the matter. But me, being this idealist at heart, thought, if we're going to demolish, how can we actually make that a responsible decision, being throwing away all these resources that are coming out of the demolition? So when we made this project, we said climate neutral for us is also circular. We want to optimally reuse all the waste coming from the demolition into the new neighborhood that will arise at the same location. So these are pictures from what it looked like in 2008. And you can see a small picture of what it looks like today. So the last phase was actually opened up, I think, 3 years ago. But it's not about the project, it's about the lessons that I really learned from this project. And what I really found is that although we were able to reuse 95% of the materials from the demolition in the new project, what I found even more astounding was that next door to this project was a new project that actually won a very high architectural award last year, which is called the Rue Paré. And it's a sort of social project, community project. And we were actually able to reuse a number of components from the old construction at this location. But the only reason we were able to do that is because my brother was the architect of this building. And I'm not saying this to promote my brother, even though he is a good architect, I think. But I am saying this because the reason that this was made possible is because of this matter of coincidence. I was having a cup of coffee with my brother. He said he needed cheap building materials, and I said, why don't you go speak to my client? So what I found then in 2008 is that circular economy is very dependent on coincidence. If this project wouldn't have been next door, if I hadn't had that cup of coffee with my brother, it would have been impossible to realize this. So this is one of my lessons. A few years later, we were involved with the construction of a new 4-star hotel, which is now has opened last year. It's the QO Hotel, a hotel from IHG. And there we also had a high circular ambition. And aside from all the design aspects where we really looked at multifunctional use in the future, so we made sure that the floor heights were extremely high so that it could become a library or a home in the future, we also started to look at the material reuse option. And what we did, because we found, of course, again by coincidence, that in the north of Amsterdam, this building that was formerly used by Shell was being demolished, or partially demolished, and we thought, well, isn't that a matter of coincidence? What if we use the facade coming from this building, because it is the same contractor that is building this building, and we will reuse the concrete in that building for the structure. So all these calculations were done, of course, and we managed to actually use the facade coming from this building for the first 7 floors of this building. Again, coincidence. If the location of this building had been any further, it would have not worked out because the cost would have been too high to reuse the concrete because of all the transportation costs. Again, a lesson. Finally, and this is a very cute project, I would like to say, because it is my own office. But here again, a number of lessons, and this is why I want to really make it practical. How do you really bring circular economy in practice? We wanted to have our office really be a business card for our vision. So we wanted to reuse materials in order to actually construct our own office. Here again, coincidence couldn't have been bigger, because first we started to look at waste management companies to see if they had materials that we could build with. Yes, they said, we have beautiful wooden panels that you can use, but in order to make the design, you need to pick them up today, because otherwise they will be burned in order to make energy. In the end, what happened was that the organization that we rent our office space from said, listen, we're actually doing a couple of renovations. So we have all these beautiful meeting room panels coming from actually an old municipality office in the west of Amsterdam. You know, they're up for grabs if you'd like them. And we're also doing a renovation at a larger elderly home, and you can also use them for construction purposes if you like. So what we did is we actually harvested these materials from these renovation projects. At that time, they were free of cost, so the only costs that we had were making the transportation from the location that they were harvested from to our office building. And now we have this beautiful office building that actually really shows what we stand for as an organization. But I think it's really important to not only look at these cool and fun projects, but to really also look at what can we learn from these projects, because these are really challenges that we need to overcome when looking at a circular city. And I think a number of key challenges really arises. One is time, the factor time. When a certain material stream becomes available, you need to be able to reuse that quickly thereafter, because if you need to actually store these materials, that will be costly. We need to look at quality. How do we know that the quality of the waste streams is good enough to reuse in the new building or in the new application? Quantity. What if I didn't have enough glass panels to make my meeting rooms? What would we have done? We need to look at location, which is very clear coming from also the hotel case. If it would have been any further in a different city, the costs would have been too high and we wouldn't have been able to reuse it. And also the cost in general. How do we overcome this factor? And I need to add there as well, and Evelien has already mentioned the tax issue, but I think one of the real challenges is also if organizations don't change their business as usual, it'll be very difficult to actually transition to a circular economy. Finally, I was asked to speak about a circular city, and I purposely really made that very small and practical to show what's being done in projects. I think it's really important when thinking of a circular city to also really look at how do we make sure that everyone feels responsible for actually transitioning to that vision of a circular city. Because in my experience, the larger you make the scope, the smaller the feeling of responsibility. And I think that in addition to moving towards a circular city, which is systemic in nature and of course very important, we also need to really encourage organizations to look at circular products, circular buildings, because that's when they actually feel responsible and really have a high degree of responsibility. To conclude, I just want to leave you with an inspiring quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." And I hope that we will all take our responsibility to create a circular, better future. Thank you.